Greetings, Ventures. This is Lauren, your guild advisor, and welcome to my cut content and episode review for DanMachi Season 2, Episode 6. Now, with the last video, I know I was a bit still depressed on how the Wargame arc was handled, but I'll try to stay away from that in this video and just try to focus on Volume 7 as a whole, the Haruhime arc as a whole for this video. And I will be doing more videos about how well Season 2 has been adapted, give or take a better term for well, but that's a different video that I'll be doing when Season 2 ends. I'll be covering how I think JC staff handled the adaptation of the Wargame arc, the Haruhime arc, and possibly even material beyond those two. Now, in my previous episode discussion, I did discuss how some of the prologue to Volume 7 was skipped, and they do come back to it here, at least for some of it. And here you basically see Ishtar come out and tell her family members to go out and do their business, which is namely prostitution, as you can see here in the episode, and go seek out potential customers. Now, they didn't cover the entire prologue. There's some stuff they skipped over, like that's the first time you see some of the Ishtar family members, like Aisha, and also they show Haruhime at the end of the prologue, and she gazes out into the moonlight and says, 7 more days. Now, I'm not going to explain why she says that, but I do think that would have been a much better place to end the episode in the previous episode, in episode 5, where they had that ending with the Mikoto and the moon, and then they just skip to a weird lewd shot of Haruhime that doesn't really fit the tone of the ending of the episode. It would be much more fitting if they put that little part of the prologue with Haruhime gazing out into the moon, saying 7 more days. That's a bit more mysterious and more in line with the tone that episode 5 ended on, but it is what it is. Now, like I said before, this is the first appearance for Ishtar in the DanMachi anime, but if you've seen my Before You Should Watch Season 2 video, you'll know that Ishtar has been mentioned multiple times in the light novels that Season 1 covers. They just didn't cover who Ishtar is in any of her scenes. But if you have not seen that video, I highly suggest you go and watch it, and also illustrate just how jealous Ishtar is of Freya, her fellow goddess of beauty, because Freya is, of course, way more popular than Ishtar, even though Ishtar has this whole dominion over this pleasure quarter, but that's another thing to discuss later on in the episode. Now, at the very beginning of this episode, we immediately get into Mikoto basically sneaking out of the Familia home and then going towards the pleasure quarter. It pretty much happens the same way in the light novel, but the meeting between Chigusa and Mikoto happens the next day, and then the following night, that's when Mikoto actually goes out. And during that time, Lily, Belle, and Welf actually mention that Mikoto has been looking at like the window she's been planning to sneak out of the entire day, so it's pretty easy to read what Mikoto was going to do. And one thing I would like to comment on is that I really like the music selection they use, specifically in the part where they enter the pleasure quarter for the first time. You hear that Arabic type of music, and I really do think that fits the whole tone of the pleasure quarter, so a good selection on the music there. But as they're tailing Mikoto and Chigusa, they have these like kiss marks appear all over Belle for some reason. Like, as you know, there's no way that Lily would let any woman get like within 3 feet of Belle, so you wonder why they put those kiss marks on Belle's cheeks. I guess it's for like comedic effect and to like symbolize how nervous Belle is, but I think there are better ways to do that. Just animate Belle like moving his face around and being all nervous and everything. It doesn't make any sense for him to have those kiss marks because no one's been kissing him, because there's no way that Lily would let that happen. And they cut the tailing scene a bit short because in the light novel, as they're tailing Mikoto and Chigusa, they follow them for quite a bit, and there's actually some adventurers that approach Mikoto, and she is so nervous that she actually throws one of them onto the ground, and then they tell him a bit more, and that's when 2 gods actually approach Chigusa and Mikoto and then tease them, and that's when Belle and Welf go in and then bail Mikoto and Chigusa out of that awkward situation. And in the anime, they show Belle being separated immediately for comedic effect, I'm guessing, but in the light novel, it's actually not revealed that Belle is away from the party until that moment when Welf actually says, "Wait, where's Belle?" I'm not too sure on why they changed that. I guess it's just for comedic effect of Belle just being lost in the rush of the pleasure quarter. But this is actually where I thought they would end episode 5 on, because I didn't think they would take so long with that slow pacing with episode 5. I thought that would have been the perfect time to reveal that Belle was missing, because they could just frame the episode a bit cleverly showing the conversation between Chigusa, Mikoto, Lily, and Wealth. And then Belle being missing would be that small cliffhanger for the end of the episode. But the conversation between Wealth, Lily, Mikoto, and Chigusa is about the same, but Wealth does mention, like, hey, why don't you just bring Oka here, because he's the leader of Takemikazuchi Familia, and that's when Mikoto actually spills the beans that Chigusa likes Oka in that way, of course, romantically. And Chigusa would not want to bring Oka into the pleasure quarter for obvious reasons. So it's a bit of a shame they left that little detail out, because it just builds upon the other characters in DanMachi just a little bit more. And then we get that scene where Haruhime and Belle lock eyes for the first time. And in the light novel, it's actually described that it lasts 1 second, but to Belle it almost felt like a minute, because he was just basically entranced by Haruhime's gaze. And it's described that gaze that Haruhime has is almost sad and longing, as you can see here. Haruhime is not the type of character you would think would be a prostitute, but here she is in that situation. And of course we have Belle bump into Hermes, and he's actually really happy to bump into a familiar face. And the scene between them is pretty much the same, but Hermes does tease Belle a little bit, saying that, asking if Belle wants any pointers on picking a girl. And of course Belle, the bashful boy is like, no, that's not why I'm here. And then that's when Hermes gives him that aphrodisiac bottle and then leaves him, and then Belle chases after him and then bumps into Aisha. Now this scene between Aisha and Belle pretty much is the same. In the anime, it's shown that Belle says, I can't break free, and what you should garner from that is that you know that Belle is now level 3, and he's not able to break free of Aisha's grasp. So that would mean that Aisha is of similar strength or even stronger, so Aisha is at least level 3 here. And that's when the other Amazons bump in, and the one Amazon I would like to mention is Elena. Now, Lena doesn't really get that much screen time in the light novel, for light novel 7. She's actually a more prominent character in the Sword of Oratoria series, and I really do hope they do a Sword of Oratoria season 2. But I also hope that they adapt the material in that a lot better than they did in season 1, because to me, Sword of Oratoria's anime was a big disappointment, because they just missed a lot of the things that made those books in Sword of Oratoria great. But I do think the source material for a potential season 2 in Sword of Oratoria would be really, really strong, and it would be hard to mess it up. But JC Staff has shown me otherwise on countless occasions. But anyway, back to Lena. So actually, prior to the release of the Haruhime arc episodes, they revealed some of the character designs for the characters that would be appearing. And on Haruhime's character sheets, she had about 1K likes on Twitter. And on Lena's character sheets, she also had almost the same amount of likes as Haruhime, which you would think would be the most liked character. So what that tells me is that a lot of light novel readers are watching this material, like they know about Sword of Oratoria and what Lena's role is in that, and that's just stuff to get into a different time. But one thing I would like to mention is that in Volume 7, Lena isn't really named too much, because in this section in Volume 7, not many of the Amazons are actually named, besides Aisha, and then later on we'll see the Toad. You'll see when Aisha or Toad is not mentioned, you'll say, an Amazon did this, an Amazon said this, and they gave those roles to Lena. So that makes me really happy, because Lena is a character I really like in the future light novels, so it's cool to see that they're giving her a lot of love here in the anime. And also when the Amazons revealed to Aisha that Belle is the little rookie, the same person that won the war game against Hyacinthus and Apollo Familia, Aisha's gaze on Belle like intensifies. It starts to scare Belle, because it like activates those Amazon instincts that want to seek out a partner. And Belle, recently being very popular, being the fastest person to level 3 and also the victor of the war game, that activates Aisha's instincts immediately. And in the light novel, the other Amazons actually start to gang up on Belle and like start to grab at him, and that's when Aisha pulls him away and says, he's mine. And then that's of course when they lead Belle to Ishtar Familia's home. And when Belle actually sees Ishtar, he's a bit entranced by her appearance, because as most gods and goddesses are in DanMachi, they are incredibly attractive. And of course, with Ishtar being a goddess of beauty, she is no exception to that rule. But as you can see in the episode, Lena like tackles Belle, saying not to look at Ishtar. In the light novel, Aisha actually commands Belle to look down, because Ishtar, being a goddess of beauty as well as Freya, they both have this innate aura around them called charm, which basically just enchants the adventurers around them into basically succumbing to them and being able to just obey their will. And also, by the way, that male character behind Ishtar is her attendant, Tammuz, who is kind of like her attendant, like Otto is to Freya. And then we get Belle and the Amazons in the waiting room, and I really like this scene. I really like the smug look that Lena has on Belle during this entire time, because like I said, I'm a fan of Lena. But the light novel really goes down into what the Amazons are. Amazons are a female-only race, so to procreate, they actually have to actively seek out males and, of course, mate with them to create offspring to ensure the survival of their race. And that's something that appears in Belle's mind, like as he's having this conversation with the Amazons, he's really scared because he's heard stories of males being captured by Amazons and then them coming back from that experience and just not being the same. And that's why when you see Belle start to run away from them, he says to himself, if they catch me, this will be the end of Belle Crannel as an adventurer. And of course, we get the reveal of Pyrenees. So actually what really happens in the light novel is that she doesn't announce herself immediately, but you hear her approaching, and that's when the other Ishtar family members start to get a bit scared, and you're like, why are they acting scared? And you see here in the anime, Pyrenees reveals that she is the commander of Ishtar Familia, so she's the strongest person in the Familia, which isn't that big of a deal for her to say that here, because it does clarify that she's the strongest. But in the light novel, it says that Belle, since becoming rank 3, level 3, he's able to sense other people's strengths a lot better. Like, he's able to sense that aura around them and gauge their strength. And when faced with the Toad, I will just call Pyrenees Toad because that's a fun nickname for her that Aisha gives her. When he sees Toad for the first time, he realizes that she is strong. And man, when Toad says that she's more beautiful than Ishtar, you can't help but facepalm really hard. But it's hard to argue with her when she's the strongest person in that familia. And the one thing that is a huge disappointment to me for this episode is, like, you see when Belle gets away from Ishtar Familia and starts running away at his first opportunity, and that's when they basically have a race to get Belle, and whoever gets to him gets to be able to be with him. But they skip the entire chase scene in the light novel. Like, it encompasses almost like all the pleasure quarter. Belle is running all over the place, and he keeps bumping into another Ishtar Familia member left and right. He keeps getting his location called out, and it doesn't make sense for him to, like, get that distance from them so quickly like it is in the anime, because Pyrenees is stronger than Belle, so she should be therefore faster than Belle. So in the light novel, she does catch up to Belle. She actually grabs him by the collar and slams him onto the ground, and he rolls around for a bit and damages his clothes. And then at that point, the Amazons catch up to Pyrenees Toad, and they try to stop her because Aisha's like, I don't care if Belle, like, gets away, just make sure Toad doesn't get him. And during all that, it's just crazy because Toad, of course, being super strong, is like damaging the pleasure quarter. She's like breaking walls trying to get the Belle. She actually picks up an Amazon and throws the Amazon at Aisha, who is able to pin down Belle at some point during this chase scene. And it's just incredibly disappointing that they cut the entire chase scene, and then it just was basically made into a few stills at the very beginning of Belle's flight from Ishtar Familia. It's just, I don't understand why they had to cut all of that. I guess JC staff can only animate one flight scene per season, because we had that flight from Apollo Familia when Hestia Familia was being attacked. But it's just incredibly disappointing because it just illustrates how big Ishtar Familia's influence is on the entire pleasure quarter. Like, they control this entire area. All that is under their control. And it also illustrates just how strong Pyrenees is, how strong Toad is, because she's destroying things left and right, breaking walls just to get to Belle. And I don't know, guys, it's just, I wish they animated that, because it's a really desperate time for Belle. It's set in the light novel that he's running harder than he ever did in his entire life. He's running harder. He wants to get away more than he did against the Goliath that chased him, Welf, and Lily down on floor 17 as he tried to escape onto floor 18 in season 1. Like, that's how scared he was. That's how desperate he was. He says in the light novel, I've never been more scared of women than I have at this moment, because the majority of the women in Belle's life right now have been very kind to him, and then here they want to devour him. But I guess JC staff is more concerned about animating an original 3-minute bathhouse scene than they are of animating actual material that showcases just how big the influence is for Ishtar Familia and their strengths. But going into the more fateful half of the episode is Belle's meeting with Haruhime. So these scenes with Haruhime and Belle are adapted pretty faithfully, but there are a few things I'd like to note. So as I mentioned before, during that chase scene, Belle has a lot of his clothes pretty much torn. So when Haruhime goes to unbutton Belle's shirt, it actually does reveal his entire chest. It's not just like his V-neck and you kind of see a slip of his collarbone. It's the whole thing. It's the whole goods for Belle. And of course, you see Haruhime lose consciousness at that moment. So you wonder, like, is this really a prostitute? But she loses consciousness, and instead of falling backwards in the light novel, she falls forward onto Belle, and Belle is pretty much being squeezed by her treasures. And during that, the Amazons that are looking for Belle actually come up to that floor, open the door, and ask Haruhime if she's seen Belle. And it's at that moment that they see that Haruhime is on top of Belle, and they apologize and then leave the room. But during that, you hear them say, like, man, I'm impressed that Haruhime actually pinned someone down. And that kind of builds upon, like, showing that Haruhime is not, like, the best prostitutes in the Familia. And I wonder why they would cut that out, because surely it's not because they don't want people on top of Belle, because they show Lena tackling Belle and being on top of him early on in the episode. So I'm not sure why they cut that out. I thought that would work a lot better comedically than just showing those random kiss marks on Belle for no reason. And of course, Haruhime wakes up and then they start conversing. And basically, Haruhime is just constantly asking Belle questions and he's answering them. Of course, he says what his dream is, and you see that in the anime. But rather than Haruhime switch the subject to herself, she actually gets embarrassed because there's like a pause between the two in the conversation, and she realizes that she's only been asking Belle questions, not giving Belle any opportunity to ask her. And that's when Belle asks who she is, and that's when she gives her little backstory. And they do cut her backstory a little short here, but it really isn't too important in the grand scheme of things. And they might also come back to it in a later episode because of her relation to Chigusa and Mikoto and Oka. So you might see a bit more on her backstory there. So I'm not going to tell you too much about that right here. But what I really enjoy in this scene between Haruhime and Belle is just how happy they are, how natural they are together when they're talking about heroic tales, because this is something that Belle doesn't really have many people to talk to about. Like, he doesn't really converse with Tiona about them, even though she also likes those stories. But here, he's able to talk to someone finally about these heroic stories and how much he likes them, and you see them like tease each other and quiz each other and what several of the stories are. And it eventually reaches that point where Haruhime has that discussion with Belle on how she doesn't deserve a hero because she's a prostitute. And what I really like that they show here is like how depressed Belle is, like how conflicted he is in hearing that. Because when Haruhime is done with her monologue on how she does not deserve a hero to save her, and she doesn't deserve to even think about them, you see Belle's expression. He's just totally depressed. He's totally conflicted on what to do, because he tells her earlier that surely a hero will come and save you. And unfortunately for Belle, like in the light novel, it shows that he's thinking of trying to rescue Haruhime himself, like, let's just leave this place together. Like, he's thinking that, but he knows he's not strong enough to do that, and he knows that would be a really bad idea, because right now he's running away from Ishtar Familia, and taking Haruhime with him would just bring conflict with Ishtar Familia, and know that he just got done doing the war game with a different Familia, so a conflict with another Familia is the furthest thing he wants right now, especially because Ishtar Familia is so much bigger and so much stronger than Apollo Familia. And of course, Belle carries that depressed mood with him as Haruhime guides him out of the pleasure quarter and on into Daedalus Street, and you can see, even though they don't show his entire face, you see his expression and how upset he is that he's not able to do anything at this moment. And I do like that they add Aisha right here, because it shows that Aisha let Belle go as she's watching Haruhime. And you also see Haruhime reveal earlier on in the episode that Aisha takes care of her. You can see that right here as Aisha is tailing Haruhime and telling her to come with her and let's go home. And then the other part to this episode with Ishtar and Hermes. So in this part of the episode, it's pretty much the same thing in the light novel. There is one thing I would like to note though, and that's Hermes actually does reveal what the contents of the package is, and they might and obviously to reveal what that is. But for those of you that want to know what it is, because it doesn't reveal anything right away, like you're just gonna wonder like what does that mean? What's it do? So, but if you're worried about the spoilers, go ahead and skip like 5 seconds into this video. It's called the Killing Stone. So, yep, that's what it's called. And you can think and drop conclusions on what that might mean. But poor Hermes, he went ahead and got abused by Ishtar here in this episode because Ishtar wants to know like anything she can on Freya because she wants to surpass Freya. She wants to get behind Freya's back. And that's when, of course, Ishtar uses her beautiful body as a tool to get more information out of Hermes. And though Hermes got abused here, he also is kind of a lucky guy. So it is what it is, I guess. But she gets that information out of Hermes that Freya has taken a liking to Belle. And of course, that will set some future plot lines up in the upcoming episodes. But that pretty much wraps up the episode. And it's a pretty faithful adaptation this time. They adapt a few of the pages from the prologue, of course, that they skipped from the previous episode, and they cover about 70 pages, ending on page, I believe it was 111 I wrote down here. So it's about 70 pages they covered, which is pretty much double the page count from the previous episode. And again, the biggest thing I have to criticize is, of course, skipping that entire chase scene between Ishtar, Familia, and Belle. I don't know why that was necessary, unless they're gonna do more material beyond volume 7 here, because they did an incredibly slow pace for the previous episode, only covering about 30 pages, and I said they did that original scene that lasts like 3 minutes in the bathhouse, and then they choose to cut the chase scene here in episode 6, and that's just incredibly disappointing to me. But we'll see how the rest of the arc shapes up and how the rest of the adaptation holds up. But another thing I did like, of course, was how much Lena was involved here, because, like I said, the Amazons aren't really labeled too much besides Aisha and the Toad in this part of the light novel, so it's cool to see Lena get some of the spotlight, and I also like the expressions they have Belle make during that conversation between Haruhime and himself, and the conflict of Belle trying to, or wanting to save someone who is a prostitute, and who Haruhime says are the ruin of heroes. So this is definitely a new experience for Belle, and something he really has to think about, like what are his views on prostitution. Is Haruhime worthy of being saved? And that's something that, of course, will pop up in later episodes. And as for the sub-story in the Memo game, the DanMachi mobile game, it covers an original scene that's not in the light novel, and it happens post-war game, and it's a scene between Eyes and Belle. So definitely check that out, because I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. If you have the game, go ahead and check that out. And if you don't and still want to see it, I'm sure someone will upload it on YouTube somewhere for you to see. So again, enjoy that sub-story. I'm glad that they're focusing on more original content for these and not just putting in stuff that they skip from the light novels, because like I said, I want them to cover the stuff from the light novels in the anime and not skip it like they did with the entire chase scene here. But anyway guys, thank you so much for watching Season 2 Episode 6 Cut Content and Episode Review. I'll be back next week with Episode 7, and hopefully they do a better job with that one with less cuts, because again, I'm still very disappointed what they did here, but hopefully they do a better job in the future episodes. But anyway, if you like this video and would like to see more DanMachi content, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and follow me on Twitter and join my Discord. And as always, continue enjoying your time venturing in Orario and the dungeon. This is Lorne, your guild advisor, signing out.